Ah, tá. Você está testando a pausa, né? Não, eu parei de te ouvir.
Alô, agora foi. Porra.
O que estava acontecendo?
Me ouvindo, né?
Estou te ouvindo, você me ouve?
Aham. O meu outro fone, o Zoom não reconheceu, não sei por quê.
Ah, tá. Então, eu tô nessa sala gigante, mas eu acho que não vai vir muita gente. Enfim,
Percebi. Porra, bem grande.
é, isso porque eu peguei a menor, tinha uma maior ainda. Enfim. Ah, e aí, tudo em ordem?
Hum?
Tudo em ordem? Você, eu esqueci, você já está gravando, né?
Tá parecendo que tá gravando.
Tá,
Já
beleza.
gravou automático.
Eu acho que você que vai ter que autorizar as pessoas a entrarem, né?
Tem um pessoal no, na espera já.
Ah, tá. Eu pedi para o pessoal que vai apresentar entrar antes, se quiser ir liberando.
Ah, eu só preciso confirmar. Deixa eu abrir o schedule aqui.
Ah, boa, tá, beleza. Nossa, eu nem tomei meu café ainda. Peraí.
Nossa, aqui não dá pra saber quem que é que tá presente. Tá ligado? A Giovanna tá aqui. Pô, sei.
Boa. É, libera, qualquer coisa a gente expulsa a pessoa.
É porque, tipo, tem uma pessoa que o nome é J.O. É tipo, mano.
É,
Bom
bom,
dia.
ajuda. Oi,
Bom
Giovanna,
dia.
tudo bem?
Oiê.
Tudo bom?
Gente, vocês viram que eu enviei um. Vocês estão me escutando bem?
A gente...
De boa?
Oi, desculpa.
Vocês estão me escutando bem?
Sim, sim, sim. Acho que se você botar perto da boca, melhora. Mas
É,
estamos sim.
é, por, é porque eu tô no improviso, assim, porque o meu PC eu não comprei o adaptador aqui dessa coisa dos Estados Unidos.
Tá.
Aí eu tô no iPad, aí o fone do iPad é ruim. E eu mandei só uma imagem pra compartilhar. Vini, você consegue compartilhar quando eu for falar? Porque o Jaime vai estar meio doido.
Mandou aonde?
No nosso grupo do WhatsApp. Um PDF.
Ah, tá. Tô abrindo aqui.
Que eu vou falar, eu vou só falar, e daí você só deixa essa imagem enquanto eu falo.
Ah, eu vou testar isso aqui, peraí.
Daí eu queria entrar pra testar.
Nossa,
Gente, só uma. Enfim, hoje é meu aniversário também. Então são muitas emoções.
Feliz aniversário, amigo!
Obrigado, gente.
Quantos anos?
parabéns.
Ai, Giovana, não precisa não saber.
Claro que precisa, eu quero saber.
Tô brincando, eu tô fazendo 36.
Amigo, mas você tá com carinho de 31.
Ah, mas é porque
Tá
eu
vendo
passei
a
por
tela?
procedimento. Ah,
Sim,
que legal.
deu certo.
Gostei de ver.
Ah, eu podia ter feito uma. Ô, Giovana, você se incomoda se eu usar essa imagem para quando eu for falar da Ruth também?
Claro que não, amigo. Pode pegar. E esse QR Code aí, a Mari e a Rê liberaram também. Tá toda a produção dela nesse QR Code.
Ai, que demais. Nossa. Tá, eu vou. Ô, Vinícius, então, quando eu for começar a falar, depois do Welcoming, eu vou fazer a homenagem para a Ruth e aí você compartilha essa tela, pode ser?
Pode ser.
Tá, eu
O...
acho que você. Ah, fala. Não, desculpa.
Aí vocês ficam vendo. Ah, tá, beleza. Não, é porque agora eu consigo ver vocês em full screen aqui, tá bom.
Tá.
Eu achei que não dava
Então,
pra fazer isso.
então, é que eu escrevi um texto em homenagem a ela para uma revista. É uma revista que eu escrevo texto às vezes, e eu vou ler esse texto, que é bem curtinho,
Ah, tá.
como homenagem a ela, tipo farewell, sim, só, porque se eu for no improvisation, aí vai virar uma bagunça.
Não, beleza, Giovanna. Obrigado por preparar isso. Eu também vou ler algo bem curtinho. Vamos deixar o pessoal entrar, porque eu acho que o pessoal tem que testar.
Pode ser. Tipo, eu não consegui bater aqui, deixa eu ver.
Não,
Quem.
relaxa.
Eu
Se
não sei.
vier, se vier alguém que a gente não quer, a gente pode expulsar depois.
É, e sabe o que eu ia falar, Vini? A galera
Do
que
que
deu
tá aqui eu
no
não
laboratório,
consigo.
que
Ah,
deu no laboratórios, a galera começou a mexer sem querer e desenhavam na apresentação, assim. Então, eu acho que dá pra desativar pra galera conseguir, tipo assim, sabe?
bom, porque o que tem aqui na espera tem Ceifale Bargava, Sengu, Cristine Ramos Mahler e a tal da
Ah,
JO, que
tá.
parece ser uma
Não, libera
senhora.
todo mundo. Sengu é do Sica, Cristina é uma
É,
das apresentadoras. Pode ir
É?
liberando, pode ir liberando.
Sengo é turca.
É.
Deixa eu... Vou admitindo.
Oh, John, is that you? Ah, eu acho que J.O. é John Alckmin. Nossa, que alegria que ela vai entrar. Cristine, você consegue me ouvir?
Eu consigo.
Ah, eu queria testar o compartilhamento de tela.
Consigo ouvir, sim.
Tudo bem com
Obrigada.
você?
Tudo ótimo,
Você
graças
quer
a Deus.
compartilhar a tua tela para a gente testar? O Vinícius ele vai liberar o. E aí, Vinícius, tem que botar todo mundo que vai apresentar como co-host também.
Ah, como co-host, tá.
Por enquanto, acho que é só a Cristine e Sheipalha, eu acho que só tá público.
Droga. Cristine tá de co-host.
Você quer compartilhar a tua apresentação, Cristine?
A Karin também vai apresentar, né?
Tá.
Karin, Claudia. O Wilfried tá entrando.
Ótimo. Cristine, você conseguiu compartilhar?
Good morning, Wilfried. Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning for
Morning.
us. It's good
Morning.
afternoon for you guys in Europe.
Nuno,
Hello, Wilfried.
how are
I'm
you?
with our students from the PhD in Coimbra.
Very good.
They're willing to know you personally in 2 weeks.
Yes, very good in advance.
A gente tem algumas pessoas que falam português aqui, viu, professor? Bem-vindos
Sim,
todo
sim,
mundo.
eu sei. Jaime, como é que está?
Tudo certo? Tudo ótimo e com vocês. Hi,
Hello,
Wilfried.
Morten.
Huh?
Hello,
Hi,
hello,
Morten.
Jaime.
Afternoon.
How are you? Hi, Kazi.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi, Wilfried, and
Hi, Kazi.
hi. How are you?
Very well. So you are where now? Because you have daylight?
I'm in Philadelphia.
Oh
It's
yeah,
morning,
that's why. Okay,
right?
yeah, that
Right.
explains it.
Yeah.
I'm in Shanghai and it's
Oh,
pitch
you're in
black
Shanghai.
now. Yeah.
And I'm in between.
Hello,
I'm
Hello.
welcome.
good to see you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. And can I ask you to share your presentation, maybe, just so we can check if everything's fine?
Sure. Yeah.
And hello.
Pode ser ótimo. Não aparecemos todos.
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So, and later I will move to the full screen.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much. You can stop sharing. I invite Christine, Kadu, and Karin to share and Claudia to share the screens if you want, please. Kadu, maybe we can start with you. We want to share your presentation just for...
Yeah, just a second.
No worries. Okay, thank
Wait.
you. Vinícius, bota a Cláudia também para co-host, por favor. Ela vai apresentar.
Áudio. Ah, tá. Feito. A Morten não vai apresentar.
Morten, you didn't prepare anything, right? Like you're not going to share anything, just to double check.
Yeah, that's correct. I do have a couple of questions though.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Thank you so much. Kadu, eu consegui ver aqui. Obrigado. Sorry, I'm mixing the language already. Karin, do you want to share your screen also?
Hey everyone. Yes, let me give that a go. Can we see that?
Mm-hmm.
We can. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Great.
Now, I want to invite Claudia to share her presentation if possible.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Just a second. It's okay.
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
That's perfect. And finally, Christine, would you like to share your screen? Hello. There is some coffee there. Buenos días. Mucho gusto. Estoy un poco, bueno, estamos todos un poco. ¿Todo bien? Mucho gusto, bienvenida. Oh yeah, I can see that. Thank you so much, Christina.
Welcome.
So that is all right, Jaime?
Sorry, Vinicius? No, Johnny.
See?
Yeah.
Removeu.
Jaime, can I just ask, in the program I have been sent, it's Aniruddh Sharan who is presenting today.
Yes. So
is that?
Yeah. So basically, I'm gonna welcome everybody. Gonna say a few words and invite Giovanna and Wilfried to complement them, an homage to Professor Ruth. And then we'll have Anne's, that is already in the room, keynote lecture with a response from Wilfried, a break, and then I introduce you, and you can introduce the panelists in order.
Cool. And I'm right that Aniruddh Sharan is one of the presenters of papers, right?
She's what, sorry?
A presenter of a paper today.
And yeah, she's going to give the first keynote lecture, the opening keynote lecture of the conference. But she's not a panelist.
All right. I also have in the program that together with Kadu Tomita, Inês Moreira is also an author. Is that correct?
Yes, Kadu, I understand only you are going to present today, right?
Yeah, that's right. She's a co-author, but she's not here today.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so Morten, the four panelists are already here. So Karin, Claudia. Oh no, we are missing Aniruddh. Aniruddh is here?
Hello.
Yes, he is.
Oh, how are you, my friend?
Good. So nice to see you.
Good to see you. You recognize this room, right? You had some
Yes,
classes
very
here. Okay, welcome back. Do you want to share your presentation just to double check?
Sure. Should I share the screen right now?
Yo no tuve tiempo de comer mi muffin. Estoy como seguro.
Maybe like quick bites.
Yeah, like under the table.
Pobre.
Oh, wait a second. Oh, Christine, I'm so sorry. I asked you to share your screen, but you're not presenting today. But it's good to know it. Everything is fine.
Yes, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you.
I just mixed the names.
If you have a minute, I'll just say hello to Anne. Anne, hi, how are you? Kazi here. You're muted.
Jaime muted me. Yeah, very nice to see you.
Yes, Anne, looking forward to
It's a long time. It's a long time that we didn't
It's
meet.
a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But good to see you and looking
You have
forward.
not changed.
Neither have you. No, I have changed. Yes, good to see you.
Okay, we're gonna wait 5 more minutes and then I'll start, but I'm happy we are all here and ready.
Jaime, are we ready to start?
Hi, yes, I'm gonna wait 1 more minute and then we can start.
Okay, all the speakers test their presentations.
They did. We are ready and set.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Giovanna. Oh, my good friend. How are you? Nothing.
I want to say something.
You're gonna be here tomorrow, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It's 10 to 1 p.m.
Yeah. Jan is gonna join us.
Is she there? She's not there yet.
She might. Let me check. Not yet.
No, I think she's there. Right below
Where?
your temp.
Oh yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, let's start.
Hello.
Okay, we are starting. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 International Conference on Territoriality and Temporality in Architecture. This is the 5th edition of the conference, which has been held since 2021 with the invaluable help and support of many SICA members. SICA is standing for International Committee of Architectural Critics. SICA brings together critics, theorists, and historians from all over the world. Its members share the conviction that criticism and the theoretical discourse of architecture in general are integral parts of the architectural process. Consequently, SICA and its members see themselves as working towards a better architecture and better cities alongside the architects. In this year's conference, we ask, how do buildings establish and engage with territories? How do temporalities manifest themselves in buildings? How do architects deal with multiple temporalities and territorialities? How do buildings live and die? By exceeding the modernist categories of space and time to contemporary notions of territorialities and temporalities, we move from nouns to adjectives, from immutable and fixed ideas of reality to multiple socially produced and unstable qualities. Special attention will be given to how architecture engages with the past, present, and future in discussing the ecological and social potentials they convey. With an hybrid format, this year's conference aims to connect the New Haven community, where we are right now, me and my colleagues, with all the territories in the world through a live connection. We received over 100 abstracts from more than 30 countries in all the continents, which is great. Congrats to us all. As is already a tradition, I also want to remember that we will publish the annals of the conference by Park Books in Switzerland. Volumes 1 and 3 have already been printed, and Volume 2 will be available in the coming months. Finally, I want to thank the organization committee for making this all possible. Carlos Eduardo Dias Comas, Elias Constantopoulos, Giovanna Renzetti, and Vinicius Okada, who join us today. Before I introduce you to our president, Wilfried Wang, I want to speak a few words about a SICA member, critic, and professor, Ruth Verdesign, who passed away in August this year. Vinicius, can you share the... Yeah, please. That's Ruth Verdesign. So for a start, she was generous. She was enormously generous. She was clever, articulate, organized, smart, wise, kind, critical, but above all, generous. Ruth was my mentor at the first SICA conference in 2021. That is why I have a special fondness for this mentorship process, as it makes clear SICA's vocation for training new generations of critics. But I met Ruth before that. I interviewed her for my undergrad thesis 10 years ago, the best I had in my research, if I can say that. Having visited her in her old house library, I remember being fascinated by the number of books she had. On my way out, I was bold and asked if I could take one of her books with me, Brasil, Arquiteturas Após 1950, which was reading with Professor Maria Alice Junqueira Bastos. She gave me the book, of course, but she also started to give me so much more, and we started to become.
You are muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you stopped about telling about the book that you took and she gave you.
Yeah, I mean, I took it, she gave me, but then she just started to give me so much more that very moment. And I still carry so many of her lessons with me. Ruth is the type of person that opens doors, but she also widens rivers for all of us. A year ago, I gave a controversial presentation about Lucy Costa's oeuvre. She did not hide her disagreement with much of what I just said. Concerned, I went after her to ask what she thought of my presentation, if she had any criticism. We agreed to talk in detail later, but she only said what to me sums up her welcoming spirit. She said she disagreed with some of what I just said, but she liked having people around her with whom she disagrees. So she was not afraid of contradiction, of lively debate, of bringing people together, and of taking a stand. Ruth, alongside with Luis Recaman, another mentor I lost in recent years, formed the pillars of my still brief academic career, but more than that, of what I am as a researcher, professor, and person. So thank you so much, Ruth. Now I want to invite Giovanna Renzetti to also address some words on Professor Ruth for design. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. Hello, you all. Good morning, good afternoon. For some of you that don't know me, I helped Professor Ruth last year to organize the 2024 SICA conference. And I'm also one of the book editors of 2024 SICA book that's coming out hopefully in the beginning of 2026. Together, we were the editors of all the papers of last year's conference. And also, I was a student, and Professor Ruth was my PhD mentor at Mackenzie University. So I'm not going to improvise, otherwise I'm going to get too emotional, as all these almost 2 months have been very, very emotional. But I wrote a text that's going to be published next month in a local architectural magazine about Professor Ruth, and I'm going to read it to you. It's a brief text, but before I read it, I just want to thank you, you all, for being here today, for recognizing Ruth's work. I want to thank Jaime, Vinicius, Professor Wilfried for the confidence, for the patience of going through this process with me after losing Professor Ruth, and of course, Professor Comas. So I'm going to read the text for you. It's called Farewell to Ruth Verdzijn. So almost 2 months ago, the academic world of architecture and urbanism fell silent with the loss of one of its greatest historians and critics, if I dare to say. The great Professor Ruth Verdzijn, born in São Paulo and graduated from the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism at University of São Paulo, and with a master's and doctorate degree from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Ruth made an impact wherever she went, whether through her attentive attitude, her sharp reasoning, or her accurate words. Author of hundreds of articles and more than 10 books, she actively participated in national and international events, conferences, and seminars as an organizer and speaker. But I dare to say her favorite debates took place inside classrooms with her students, where ideas flowed freely and thoughts and criticisms echoed openly. She was and will continue to be a reference when it comes to modern Latin American architecture, and a leading exponent on the topic of São Paulo brutalist architecture. But she was also capable of discussing a wide range of subjects with such knowledge. Professor Ruth gave me the pleasure of being her student and doctor advisor at Mackenzie Presbyterian University, where she taught for over 28 years after finishing her contribution as a collaborator and editor of Project Magazine. We spent time together daily, not only developing studies and classes, but also sharing thoughts on architecture, teaching, and life. Ruth taught me much more than just the word of architectural criticism and historiography, helping me to be a more attentive researcher, to behave critically, and to overcome my insecurities. Having her friendship was one of the greatest achievements of my personal and professional life. In 2026, she will be recognized in the 2-volume International Encyclopedia, the Bloomsbury Global Encyclopedia of Women in Architecture, from 1960 to 2020, which chronicles the most influential women in design, planning, landscaping, history, and activism of architecture and urbanism between the 60s and the 2020s, alongside Brazilian names such as Lina Bobardi and Carmen Portinho. Teacher, mother, and grandmother, Ruth left us too soon, and the world of architecture remains silent still, stunned, and moving slowly at such a loss. However, her legacy lives on and is available to everyone in bookstores, libraries, and digital platforms. Also, this QR code that some Mackenzie professors put together all of her work, you can access. She will live also through her words that are forever. In me, at least, she remains and always will be alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. So I invite you all to access the QR code. If you don't know her writings and thinkings and critiques and theories and histories and texts, I think this is a really good moment to do so. Now I invite Wilfried Wang to make an opening statement and introduce us to the first of the 4 keynote lectures of this conference. Wilfried Wang is president of SICA. He studied architecture in London, founded Wang Partner, Berlin, with Barbara Hoy, currently professor at Tongji University, Shanghai. Author and editor of architectural publications, directed the German Architecture Museum, member of the academies in Stockholm and Berlin, honorary doctorate from KTH Stockholm, and honorary member of the Portuguese Chamber of Architects. Wilfried.
Thank you, Jaime. Dear Anne and dear Jaime, dear SICA members, dear speakers, panelists, and chairs, and dear colleagues. This series of SICA International Online Conferences is a product of the COVID pandemic. It was initially intended to gather around 20 speakers for the first of these conferences in Austin, Texas. But the format had to be adapted due to the new circumstances. And as it turns out, these free online conferences with subsequent publications of the presentations is actually has become an important contribution to the diffusion of knowledge while also avoiding a little bit of CO2 emissions as a result of speakers not having to fly around the globe. All the same, minuscule avoidance of CO2 emissions is actually irrelevant when seen against this year's average or last year's average global rise in temperature of 1.55 degrees Celsius. We are also witnessing a momentous shift in most democracies against a green agenda. Thus, in this rather depressing context, anyone working with the foremost aim of reducing emissions in mind is understandably concerned, if not frustrated. Today's keynote lecturer, Anne Lacaton, has spent over 3 decades together with her partner, Jean-Philippe Vassal, trying to convince the profession, politicians, bureaucrats, clients, and the public that we should maintain and renovate as much of the built substance as possible, rather than to demolish and replace existing buildings. And they have proven that this approach is not only possible, but that residents of transformed social housing blocks are not only proud to live in beautified buildings, but that they also regain their dignity at the end of it. They no longer live in a stigmatized building. While Lacaton and Vassal have an impressive list of successful projects to show, Anne is particularly concerned that with the commitment to climate protection diminishing around the world, all the hard work in convincing government agencies could well have been in vain. And indeed, we should be realistic in acknowledging that it is now highly unlikely that we will still be able to hold the average rise in temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius. Lacaton and Vassal, their ethical and aesthetic appeal to maximize the reuse of existing built fabric in favor of building anew is a perfect match for this year's Seeker conference topic, temporality and territoriality in architecture. For in maximizing the reuse of existing buildings, we minimize the consumption of precious and irreplaceable territory, and we maximize the length of time that buildings can be used without wasting more resources by demolishing existing built fabric. Further, in raising the aesthetic appeal of the renovated buildings, Lacaton and Vassal show us a way to maximize the appreciation by a wider public across a larger territory than taken up by the building itself for such buildings and such an approach. But Lacaton and Vassal's approach is one that fundamentally questions each decision that architects have to make, including ethical considerations as to whether to accept a commission or not. For example, at the start of their career, Lacaton and Vassal were invited by the city of Bordeaux in the south of France to remodel a small public square. But they turned it down after they had analyzed that its deficits were merely the need for a regular removal of trash, as well as the renewal of light bulbs in the street lamps. Otherwise, the square was fine. How many young architects would give up such a commission? Lacaton and Vassal's paradigmatic combination of ethical, aesthetic, and material renewal has justly been recognized across the world. They have received all the important prizes in architecture, including the Pritzker in 2021. Speaking from China, where, in part as a result of the abrupt downturn in the once overheated real estate development policy, the country is focusing on principles of recycling and shifting the focus on the retention of existing building fabric to achieve the climate protection goals. Undoubtedly, Lacaton and Vassal's body of work has also had an impact on this large nation. Anne Lacaton's generous acceptance to be the first keynote lecturer in this 5th conference is a great honor. We would like to thank Anne for sharing her thoughts and the work of her office, not just with us now, but since this lecture's recording will be available on YouTube, also with any and everyone committed to the intelligent, sustainable, and beautiful reuse of existing fabric. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And of course, I'm pleased to talk with you and to talk for you. And Wilfried, it's now a long time that we know each other, and it's always a pleasure to answer your invitation. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay, it's fine with sharing. Is it okay with the screen?
It is. It is. Thank you so much, Anne.
Okay. So buildings have a life, and it's very important to recognize this. But more, they have several successive lives. Obsolescence is neither global for a building nor the end of the building's life. We must work with this temporality of buildings, and the multiple temporalities are a source of innovation. We are now entering a culture for architecture of repairing, updating, upgrading, and transforming. It's about making with rather than redoing. It's a new culture, far away from the production of only huge iconic buildings. And it's a new culture that we must learn in order to sublimate it, and we must view it as a creative process rather than a second-rate area of architecture. Make with is about taking with you the values of an existing place and its strengths in order to use them and make them the driving force of a new project. It's a very interesting process. It requires inventing new methods and new practices. It requires looking at and analyzing, surveying buildings in a very different way, not in general, but with much greater precision of all their components in detail. There are also many positive aspects in making with. It enables us also to break free from standards, from conventions and norms, because an existing situation creates a new, unknown project condition that force to invent. And finally, it also saves a lot of wasting. Making with is far from a conservative approach, and it's not at all in contradiction with the need of evolution, reprogrammation, or densification. I will continue with some of our projects to illustrate our practice and our philosophy. We have always viewed the existing situation as opportunities, and we are convinced that every place has a value that needs to be carefully observed, revealed, and preserved. In most of our projects now, the existing environment provides the preliminary structure and the material, which makes already a large part of the new project. And we approach these projects guided by a few fundamental principles, which are: do not cut down trees, do not demolish, define the values first and do not lose them, instead of only listing problems, use everything that is already there, always let the system and the capacity open for further changes and occupants' freedom. Reactivate a former museum, reopen, re-give life, invent uses. That was the topic of the Palais de Tokyo in Paris. It's a project that we did in several phases. But the chase of this project is that it was not a project of refurbishment. This was a project of temporary installation of a contemporary art center for young artists. Because this project followed much larger project of refurbishment that the state has engaged there, that was stopped and abandoned in the situation of project, ongoing project. So this place is a famous place in Paris, built in 1937, kind of monumental architecture built for the Universal Exhibition in Paris in 37. And inside it was the first occupation was Contemporary Art Center, the National Contemporary Art Center, that afterwards moved to the Center Pompidou in the center of Paris. So, and afterwards, this place knew different uses until this project of refurbishment started. And for 1 year, the project of big refurbishment demolished the inside, the partition, the ceilings, and then suddenly stopped. And the situation of, in a way, abandoned place stayed over 5 years until the state decided to put a little money, 3 million there, to create this installation for Contemporary Art Center for young artists. So we found the situation like that when we replied to the competition, and the competition was in a way simple, but also very interesting. Just 3 teams invited for a visit, and 1 week later we had to come back and to explain our strategy to reuse this place for a period of time of 5 years. And then we explained that the place was already fascinating. The place, the architecture was already there with all these interesting different levels, 4 levels, with a lot of natural light coming from different places, sometimes a roof like this, sometimes high windows, sometimes dark like here, which is the lower level. And we just made, we said that we didn't feel the need of adding more architecture because it was already there, but just to make a very serious work of cleaning, repairing, reintroducing the minimum elements to make this building open again for artists and exhibition. Electricity system, lifts, staircase, fire security, and so on. And we say that maybe after this we would have spent the 3 million, and but the situation could be enough interesting and good to reopen again. So here you can see that this project is not about how to make a very good and conventional refurbishment. It was a huge series of little intervention here and there, but they were necessary to make the place again easy to use. So all the red lines are the new intervention. Sometimes it's reinforcing columns because they have been weakened by demolitions. So all these different things. For example, this plan where you see that all these red elements are the new elements which has been built here or renovated to make this installation. New little stair and so on. All the rest was just clean and remained. So, but in a way, doing so simple, so little things means to so many struggles to discuss conventional ways of doing. But finally, because maybe the client didn't trust that we would arrive to do it, that was the chance of the project, and that was our chance, and we could do it. So, but just a few examples to see how these projects can be achieved. It's important to have a very accurate and precise survey of the building, not in general, not just saying that because it's old, everything is bad. In fact, every component has a different cycle of light. Every component has a different level of usage. the columns are different. Here it was, and also because we didn't have money, it was important to have this very precise observation, because it was important to spend the money only and exactly where it was needed to spend it. So here it was a survey of all the columns, and we could conclude that every column needed a different renovation, because the problem was not the same for every column. At the end, okay, I cannot. Oh, and at the end, you see here that finally the treatment is not uniform. We did a special treatment for each column without finally taking care that at the end this column have different aspects. Some of them they needed more concrete, some of them needed just painting against fire, some of them just something else to protect against rust. Or so, and this is also why it's important to revise also the usual practices of renovating. So, and all these works made, this could reopen again to public and to artists. And finally, this was made the first phase in 2000, opening 2001. It was supposed to for a temporary installation of 5 years. And finally, 5 years later, the state has prolonged the temporary situation and asked again to do a second phase of repairing that we did in 2010. And now today it's still 15, something like 15 years later. It's still this temporary situation, but finally temporary doesn't mean less quality, doesn't mean less possibilities, but it just means that the way things are made is different and answered to different requirements and criteria. So this is entrance with library with very these former pictures. Now it has changed because it changes very often. Some artist work on one of the place, not anymore existing, but for a while it was a nice place where people were meeting. One of the main exhibition space on the second floor, with moving white walls, so that they have a flexibility to arrange the space. Can be dark. The lower level also with transparent roofs, but also lights coming from the which was not visible when the museum was built, because all of this had translucent ceilings. And a huge number of different exhibitions. Thomas Hirschhorn, an exhibition of 3 months on one of the space. And going down to the lower level, this kind of spaces in the dark, but very convenient for shows, little shows, concerts, or video projections. This stairs is the only main thing that we have built, because this space was a basement, which was not formally used by the public, but as we opened all the spaces to the public, this stair was necessary to go down. And this space, formerly storage, became also exhibition space for video. So this is really a project with this notion of temporary, temporality, and temporary becomes very, very interesting, because it's in fact it's replaced also this the way of how a lot of buildings are made, where from the very beginning this temporality is not taken in account. And today new buildings, they must be done for 50 years or more, while we don't know if over these 50 years there will not be a need of change. And this is interesting to, this project was for us very interesting for that reason, to understand that finally multiplying temporalities is something interesting. revive disused and abandoned buildings, reuse, reprogram, create new uses. This was a former industrial building, a big hall, which was part of this large shipyard in the north of France, in the city of north of France. And this building is the only one which remained from this. It was very close to the last place where big boats were assembled before they went to the sea. And this is the last one which remains for this large shipyard. It was a huge territory in the city, as you can see, as big as the city itself. But in the early 80s, all this place was destroyed. And only this building was kept because the citizens protested against the demolition, and they insisted that this building should be kept as a memory of the shipyard. So sometimes later, the region decided to reuse this building and to introduce inside a contemporary art center. It's a kind of regional collection, as there are a number like this in France. Regional collection of contemporary art. It means that every year some artworks are bought to young artists and they are shown to the public. So we applied to this competition. And the goal was to introduce in this huge space 7,000 square meters of new floors to create storage, to conserve the artworks, and also 3,000 square meters of exhibition space. When they opened the door, when we visited the site for the first time, we were immediately fascinated and impressed by the void, by the light coming here, by the robustness of the construction. And we had immediately the intuition that building floor inside was not the right answer. It was a mistake because it was losing the quality of this space, the huge capacity of this space. So finally, we tested different solutions during the competition time, but finally we came back to our intuition, and we proposed not to keep the void, to save the void, and to fulfill the requirement of the brief, to build an additional building just beside, exactly with the same shape and the same volume, but built as we do it today, with the materials of today, construction system, but also the requirements in terms of climatic response, saving energy, and so on. And in fact, the former building remained as a kind of extra space, an additional exhibition room, while all the new part was made for the new program. So this is the existing situation, and this is a project with this new building, which is juxtaposed to the existing space. The hall is conserved, and it's added with all these new floors for storages and exhibition space, but also this introduced into a general envelope with air in between, to make in a kind of buffer zone to allow that the control of the climatic conditions inside the space, which are very strict for conserving contemporary art, also should be minimized in terms of energy consumption. And inside this space, we introduce the new function. And this is the final result with these two buildings, but also as a kind of act of reconstruction of the lost capacity of the site. And the former hall remains empty, just a few works of electricity. And this is a new part with stairs that distribute the building and immediately brings a visitor on the top floor to visit the large exhibition rooms, but also this space, which is an extra space that responds to any requested function, but just allowing to have a look around on the landscape that you cannot see from the ground, the industrial harbor and the North Sea. So, and in between, on the left, the existing, and on the right, the new one. And this simple connection in between the two, sometimes some platforms which allow to see what happens from what happens in the space from the top. And this is the final result. Transforming buildings when demolition has been planned. Instead of demolishing and rebuilding, transform, extend, densify, resist to demolition and tabula rasa. This project is a competition that we were invited to participate in Zurich. And this place was a former factory which as became, after the factory moves to the outskirts, it became a large public hall for concerts, for cultural events, with this huge space that was roughly refurbished to make these events. And you can see here different kind of events that happen here. It's a very popular place in Zurich. And the brief of the competition was to demolish the building, except this the yellow one, the orange one, which is listed as heritage. But it was to demolish this, but to rebuild at the place a kind of similar program of cultural and public events, but also with the goal of densifying the site in order to create housing on this place. This factory was building very large pieces for engine, and so the construction was very solid. And for us, immediately it's clear that the demolishing is never the issue, so we never will go to the demolition before reconstruction. So we propose this strategy for this project is to reuse everything that can be still used, no demolition. The existing building is conserved, renovated as an urban plinth. Then we propose to create the addition, because the need of densification must be also fulfilled. And these new buildings could be built on top of the existing, because with new structures crossing the existing, crossing on places either a little out of the existing, or on places which today have not really an important function, and to create this addition, accumulation, superposition, and to fulfill the introduction of new programs. So this is a sketch of this situation. See those the available capacity and the new construction capacity of 11,000 square meters. So, and the process is this one to illustrate the existing. Then these two new buildings in blue that correspond to a tower for housing and the small building for additional offices, which land in the existing situation without disturbing the existing. So at the end, it creates this new ensemble with the existing situation conserved. The two basements also are conserved for the storage. because it was also a requirement of the brief to have storage and car parking in the basement, plus the 11,500 square meters of a new construction that you can see here, while the existing remains here. And also we took the opportunity, because this roof was extremely solid, to create also a ramp that allows to go to the roof for a public garden with greenhouses. And the new project could be implemented without interrupting the activity, because it's also interesting to introduce this continuity of service, this continuity of activity, because nothing is worse than in a city when you have a place which is closed for years and years, and because it's in a way it kills the activity of the neighborhood. So this is the renderings of the project, because this project was not selected for realization. And here the protected buildings, plus behind the new construction, that show that densification and optimization of the city ground is possible without wasting the existing still in use and in good state, and with no loss of quality nor usage. Also, some of the kind of projects on the existing is the issue of intensifying unusual places. So this is a very interesting place in Hamburg, in Germany, and this the theater Kampnagel, which is one of the biggest public subsidized theater in Germany, doing a lot of new production of research. And in fact, this theater has started 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, in a former factory, and this was this big factory in the middle of the city. Sorry. In 1950, this factory was constructing huge pieces for cranes for the harbor, just to say how big these spaces are, and the potential of these spaces. But in 1981, the factory closed. And the city started to demolish a number of former halls until a group of people protested against demolition and created a temporary theater there, just as a temporary use, just to resist to the demolition of this place. And finally, this very small action of a small reaction in creating an improvised theater there, finally arrived to do so that the place was kept. And in fact, the theater continued to grow inside with one venue, two venues. Today there are 6 venues, and it's a very, very famous and popular place. But the spirit of the factory is still there. And the spirit of being constantly in a temporary situation of which means that there's not this principle of permanent installation, which is very perceptible in the way that how the theater is proposed. So today it's very limited in this ownership, and on the place of the former. The part of the factory now, they are new buildings, and the theater is inserted in this neighborhood. So it's a very renowned theater today, dedicated to avant-garde, with 180,000 visitors a year and 900 shows a year. So when we had to work on the project, it started with just a conversation with the people of the theater before the competition. But this conversation was very interesting because, in fact, the only brief for the project was a very short note of a few pages where the theater, instead of making a list of spaces, they just expressed their wishes and their expectation for the future. So the current building is 16,000 square meters, and at the end, their need is 23.5 thousand square meters. And the need is for adding rehearsal rooms, research studio, workshops, storage, but also a residence for artists, which is all of this is not existing today. The rehearsal is made in the venues, which is not very convenient. And there is also a big need of renovating the stage technology. So the key needs, the targets of the theater was expressed in a very few words: openness to neighborhood and the public, to disciplines and events, spatial openness, flexibility, technical, a complete renovation and upgrade of the technical equipment, because it's also corresponding to what the companies needs today and the evolution of the theater of the 21st century. More functionality to make all this more easy, and also to conserve the industrial substance and the aesthetic and the potential of the volumes, creating a dialogue between the new and the old. So some pictures of the existing situation, which is really unusual, but which is so interesting when you are there. People feels very familiar on this space because it's not it's not conventional, and there is a large mix of people coming there to attend shows and the new productions. A very large venue of almost 900 seats, but still the scaffolding that's for the tribune from the very beginning. Some of the smaller rooms, but this atmosphere of in between factory and theater. So this is the situation today, and our concern and our task was how to create this necessary extension on this site, which is a great challenge because, as you can see, there is no empty space around. And the principle and the project attitude was keep, repair, add, keep the Kampnagel spirit, which means preserving the character, the authenticity, the identity, work with the existing and preserve the existing structures that should be improved, repaired, considering also the historical aspects of the place. Keep the garden preserved without cutting trees, and also keep repair add, which means that everything in good condition is maintained and repaired, and the necessary spaces are added, are created to meet the new needs and to prepare Kampnagel future through contemporary architecture. And the last thing, which is also very important, is to respect the budget, which means optimizing, finding simple solution to achieve the best balance between the artistic ambition and the functionality and the spatial quality. And it's very important, this issue of economy, because today a lot of projects are failing because it's always the cost is never under control. And this is very, very important for us to, because we are convinced that more money is not always a guarantee of doing better. So it's a different approach, but in such spaces, the existing is so valuable that just taking care of the existing, repairing, represents a huge value of the new project. So the principle for this project: no demolition, all green space conserved, no artificialization of soil, densification without using the natural ground. All the facade and the roofs of the main building are conserved and repaired where it's necessary. So again, it means a very accurate surveys of the building, and conserve the existing system, which is still in good condition. So doing that, it's also a lot of energy consumption, which is saved, dividing by two the existing consumption. Through the application of bioclimatic principles. It means the maximum use of natural ventilation, winter garden principles, thermal buffer zone, but also trying to reintroduce the natural light and the solar gains, which step by step over time has been all closed, and of course extend the barrier-free accessibility for accessibility for all the publics. So the challenge was great because again there is no space empty around the building. The garden is protected without building on it, and the plot is almost 100% occupied by building and green areas. In addition, the building, the former factory, is protected as an historical monument, which means intervention with care, limited action on the existing building, preserve the heritage, and only the space of this central part is not protected as heritage. I must say that the collaboration with the department of historical monument as a city has been very, very collaborative and successful. So finally, the proposal was to superimpose a new construction on top of the part which is not protected, and to create this new hall that we name as in the continuity of the other venues. For now, there are 6 venues, K1 to K6, and we name it K7 in reference to the existing halls. So it builds on top of this for rehearsal, research studio, storage. It's connected by a few elevators and lifts. And in addition, also above the existing sealed area used for car parking, we built a new residence for accommodating the artist, and the garden is entirely preserved. So this is the new building view from the west. So this is kind of here behind the iconic facade of the factory, which is preserved, and just this building which comes on top, detached from the roofs of the existing, and just some columns are crossing the existing, with also direct connection with the existing. So this is the main piazza. So the former buildings are still there without any change. The cafe, the cinema, and here the main venue of the theater, and the new building here on top. And on the last level of this new building, all the big rehearsal rooms with 5 meters and 5 to 6 meters on the ceiling, and also this opportunity of looking over what happens on the ground. The roof of this new building, which is also used as an open air venue on the top of the new building, that allows also to have night shows in the summertime. And the last part is because, in fact, restoring monuments or iconic buildings creates a consensus. However, there are also many ordinary buildings and loft structures, particularly the large number of modern housing estates, which are never considered valuable, and which we do not know how to look at or how to appreciate. So this is what I call transform the unloved, modern housing blocks, how to upgrade the quality, how to extend living space, to increase comfort and pleasure, how to do more with less. Because this large modern housing, they are most often today stigmatized, rejected, and more often considered as a problem than an opportunity. Most of them everywhere, they are today in a very critical situation, and as a consequence, many of these housing blocks are today demolished or are scheduled for demolition. This is especially the case in France, where in the last 15 years, about 200,000 modern dwellings have been demolished. So demolishing buildings is a huge waste. It wastes homes, jobs, energy, money, history, and it affects the lives of those who live there. So when this program was initiated in France by the government almost 20 years ago, as architects, we were really concerned by this topic, and immediately we tried to see how we could react or what we could do against what we were considering as a mistake. So just a few numbers on demolition, which is a huge problem, and which in a way doesn't seems to not to interest anybody because in fact there are still a lot of demolition. So this is numbers given by a citizen initiative, which is called House Europe, and just to say that every minute a building in Europe is demolished. Every year, thousands of houses and millions of square meters of existing space are thrown away. By 2050, if it continues that way, in Europe, we will have demolished approximately 1.5 billion square meters of existing space, which means more than the entire cities of Athens, Berlin, Bucharest, and Paris combined. Just to say how big is the scale of demolition, and it's always difficult to understand why it's so shocking, why it's not creating so much protest against it. So since 2004, together with Jean-Philippe and another friend, Frédéric Druot, we are working on this project. It's already 20 years, almost 21 years. And we publish this research that we name PLUS, studying a number of case studies with a goal to demonstrate that the demolition is a mistake and that the transformation is the solution. In this book, we showed that almost all of this building can be renovated, can be improved, can be transformed. And facing this issue of demolition, we adopted a very strong position, which is never demolish, never subtract, never remove or replace, always reuse, transform, give new life with and for the inhabitants. So, and this was based on some very simple principle that how to complete what the quality which was not done at the time of the construction in the 60s or early 70s. These studies showed us that all these buildings, they have still value, they are still solid, they have still a lot of good components, and it's not because they need to be updated that everything is bad and that they should be demolished. So starting from this very generic image, which shows, in fact, a kind of typology of these blocks, we studied that finally it was simple to open facades, to give balconies, and to transform bad quality situations into something much better. From inside also to change the situation, very low quality with these little windows, opening facade, creating balconies, and that transforms the situation. Also reviving the communal space, which very often has been closed, like somebody keeping the building. Some places for working, very often the first level, they are not the best for housing, so it could be also a possibility to introduce a kind of mixity of functions, or communal spaces for children, or for families, like sauna, washing machines, or space for meetings or conference, cinema, cooking, just meeting and playing, but also the using in a better way all the roofs, which are most of the time in a very nice situations. And doing these studies, we really studied carefully a lot of cases, going very far in the survey, in inventorying the values, inventorying the technical issues that should be solved, what was missing that should be improved. And we arrived to a conclusion that while the state was spending 165,000 euros per dwelling for demolition and reconstruction of very standard housing, in the case of the transformation without demolition, repair and bring this building in a very good situation was at the cost of 55,000 euros per dwelling. And also, in addition, it could be made without removing the inhabitants. So that was very long and almost impossible in the beginning to present this process. But we found here and there some interesting people who, like, for example, here in Bordeaux, the director of the big social housing estate that agreed, in fact, to work in that way, because himself he was opposed to the demolition. So we had to work on these 3 buildings that built in the early 70s, 530 dwellings. This is in the city of Bordeaux. This new neighborhood was built in the 60s. At the time, it was a bit out of the city center. As you see, it's a stone city, and this is a very prominent place. But now it's very much integrated in the center with all transport, public equipment. So it's a good neighborhood to live. But however, this building, as they were not really loved by people, and were really stigmatized, as well as people living there. So
sorry to interrupt them. Can I ask you to wrap up? Sorry, just because of time.
Yeah. So, but 5 minutes.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is I'm almost finished, because there is just a few notions. So what is important is not to stay outside, because staying outside finally amounts to arrive to the conclusion that it's ugly and that it should be torn down. But it's important to go inside and to visit every place and to see that the value, the richness is inside and has been given by inhabitants. So this is a variety of spaces and the qualities you find inside. So the process of transformation is first to keep all people there, all those who want to stay, and in this case, nobody wanted to leave, and to make a transformation that disturb as little as possible the inside, while some works are even done, but to make this extension on one side of 4 meters, which allows to give more space, more quality, opening large windows and give an extra space that compensate some rooms which are a bit too small. So just quickly, what is from the existing situation and the new situation with this extension applied to the old building. This is a prototype that we did because there was a process of discussion and participation of inhabitants. The prototype became the show flat of the project and where finally the inhabitants met and came to discuss and also to ask for informations. There was a building guide which was made by for the tenants, giving all the informations to help them all doing all the process first to understand, but afterwards for any practical facility. And then this is a process of transformation. So I will go faster on just showing the slides, the process of bringing the new extension, which were prefabricated, and the final result. So these modules were prefabricated outside, mounted on site, level by level, the columns, and then started the process of changing the facade. And then it was the moment where the apartment is a bit disturbed. And the commitment was to do this new glass facade in 2 days. And a few weeks later, they could benefit of this extension. So people stay inside during the works. They have just the possibility during the day to go in a flat to avoid the noise and so on. The process of opening the handrails and the new facade. And this is the radical transformation of these flats from the situation to this one with this large extension, all the rooms opening to the winter garden. And this extension that, depending on the apartment, is between 25 to 60 square meters, which is also a buffer zone that creates a lot of energy saving. And the transformation of the building from the inside, giving more space, more qualities. There was also a discussion because all these apartments are rented. So there was discussion between the group of the tenants and the owner to see how would be the rent afterwards. And finally, the rent has not been increased because it's social housing, and the owner considered that it was his duty to make all these improvements. So just to say that I will not comment these numbers, but just to say that it was made with the inhabitants staying on site, no move of inhabitants, no increase of rent plus charges. The cost was 52,000 euros for the construction, while 160,000 was the cost estimated by the city for the demolition, and 80% has been funded by the social housing company itself, and 20% public subsidies. So, and on the same principle, we did a few other projects, but only a very, very few, because in spite of the great success of these projects that are recognized everywhere, in fact, it seems that it's not enough to convince that this is a good solution instead of demolition and rebuild. So every building, every dwelling could be transformed in a sustainable and qualitative way for benefit of living space, users and inhabitants. And situations like this are so numerous everywhere. And this is surveys that we did for example, in the city of Bordeaux, to show where all this improvement could be made on modern developments. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and for a terrific and very spirited presentation, as always. You have not lost your commitment and faith to the idea, and I think it's wonderful to hear your presentation. Thank you. A lot of applause coming to you.
Thank you very much.
It is indeed very strange. I won't say very much. I'd like to give other people a chance to ask questions, but it is indeed very strange after what is really a convincing and remarkable success that this is not really taken on by other clients or housing owners. It's difficult to understand, and Berlin quite well, and Berlin could benefit in the same way, and because they have a lot of housing which is in quite a bad state, and instead they have just added the styrofoam thermal insulation and lit to the balcony.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a real shame that companies and politicians aren't really taking this on. But rather than to lament, let's ask the audience whether there are any questions. Please raise your hand if you want to ask a question. This is your chance to ask Anne Lacaton a question. Don't be shy.
I don't know how to raise a hand now, but may I make a question?
Fernando, and then Elias.
Yes, great presentation, and we admire your work for a long time. But I was wondering whether in any of these projects on social housing, you considered adding some kind of built volumes that would relate the isolated slabs to the urban tissue.
This is a very, very good question. And in fact, most of this project, if you would see the very first drawings, you will see that there is always this, what you mentioned, it's how, because one of the problems of these blocks is they are in a way planted on the ground with a very rough relation with the city and the external spaces. And this is a problem because in a way, it's very true that maybe except some of them which are more urban, it's very true that this transformation doesn't really arrive to change enough also this relation with the ground. So in many projects like this, for example, this one in Bordeaux, in the competition project, we did a kind of plinth around using the whole plot to create two little blocks of 2, 3 levels, 4 levels, which would make a kind of a relation with the street, which is in a way more related with the neighborhood, and which would allow also to introduce some other activities like retails or workshops or little atelier or something like this. But the problem is that when the projects, and for many projects we did this, the problem is that when afterwards it arrives to the realization, there is always the city that comes and that says, no, we have an urban planning, and you have not to do this because it's a task of the urban planning, and it's not your task to do this. So, and every time we are requested to stay on the footprint of our blocks. But it's what you say is very, very true. And this is a thing that we are still struggling, but for now we didn't arrive to achieve it.
It would be very interesting if you can have a leading case in that aspect.
Yeah, but it's for now it's we never arrived to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are running behind schedule, but we will allow one more question. I'm sorry, Pierana.
No, I'm sorry because I was too long.
No. Aniruddh.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful projects. I had a question regarding the future of these projects. Do you foresee them to be recognized and preserved? Do you think that is that the future that you imagine for these, or do you foresee more future transformation of these interventions themselves?
I would say that I think we never saw to it, but we are not in favor of kind of preservation as heritage of these buildings, because in fact it's important that the buildings could have lives. And maybe in 20 years, 30 years, there will be another kind of need, and it's important that it should be possible to make it. So, but in a way, what we try to do is first is to try to give a maximum capacity to the building. So, and doing this, we expect that it will be in a way enough to accept further changes. For example, maximum capacity is, as you see, for example, in the theater, is to build as much as possible on the site, but with a kind of construction which will allow maybe no need to add more square meters, but the possibility of changing the function and the use. So we don't see buildings as fixed places, but in fact we like the principle that quite immediately even the users, they can also have a kind of freedom also to use the buildings, but also in a further time to allow also new function or different uses.
Thank you, and thank you very much once again for being our first keynote lecturer.
Thank you.
Always, we derive so much energy from your presentations. It's very important for people to hear over and over again your central message, which you fight for with such verve and spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we proceed. Actually, we're supposed to have a break, but I think that we don't have a time. We don't have time for a break, so we
Sorry,
hand
I
over.
eat your time.
No, it's okay. I think the whole beginning was a little bit later, 5 minutes, so that's fine. So we hand over now to Morten, who is going to be sharing the next 4 papers.
Yes. Thank you again, Anne. Thank you, Wilfried. Let me jump in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. We're not gonna have the break. You can still have coffee if you want. You're all free to do that. I'm just gonna introduce Morten, Birk, Jørgensen, that is gonna chair the panels now. Morten is an architect and associate professor at the Institute of Architecture and Culture at the Royal Danish Academy in Copenhagen. His research examines the practices and epistemologies of evaluation in architecture, with particular attention to architectural awards, certification systems, heritage assessment, and architectural criticism. So Morten, I invite you to the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jaime, for allowing me to chair this first session, and I would also like to thank Anne Lacaton, if he didn't already leave, for this magnificent lecture on the theme that also covers the following 4 papers, namely A Building's Life. I will go directly on to introducing the 4 papers of the session, and then subsequently we hopefully have the time for the discussion when the time hits 12:40 in the Yale School of Architecture. So please, all authors, keep the time of about 10 minutes for your presentations, so we have the opportunity to comment and discuss afterwards. The first paper we are hearing is called Spatial Palimpsest and Repositories, Rotations in the Bourse de Commerce, and the case is situated in Paris, France. The paper is authored by Karin, who is a registered architect with the Royal Australian Institute of Architects and Emerging Urbanists with the UDA. Drawing from European and Australian contexts, her current research investigates spatial repositories of cultural memory, adaptive reuse, and how the phenomenology of materiality and temporal layering reshapes contemporary cultural architecture. She has presented her work in academic and professional forums and is a sessional guest critic at the University of Sydney. She is developing a practice-based PhD proposal to bridge practice and academia on adaptive reuse and spatial memory to cultivate architecture of vitality, legacy, and civic imagination, where design acts as both vessel and catalyst for cultural continuity. So please, Karin, the floor is yours.
For the introduction. Should I jump straight into it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody could see that. So just wanted to say hello. It's really wonderful to sort of be here and listen to Anne speak. This case is very much in line with the idea of a building's life because of the many lives it has lived. And just thank you, Sika, for the organization, and to Morten for the exchange over the last couple of months. So today we're talking about spatial palimpsest and repositories, rotations in the Bourse de Commerce. It's a building in Paris that I visited last year, and it is a site that is imbued very much with history, which is the quote that NEM architects had spoken about this particular project that contains the imprint of several buildings. It's very much an evolving building. So today we'll talk through the transformations over time. And these words really stand testament to cultural adaptive reuse architecture being a living archive and never being static. Particularly, this project stands not as a monument to permanence, but as a palimpsest of change. And its layered adaptation over 4 centuries of time transcends these modernist binaries of space and time. And instead, it reveals a condition that's defined by territorialities and temporalities. Its identity now as a building is characterized by this fluidity and the evolving socio-political dynamics that really define its space now. And through layering, multiplicity, and the non-linearity, it constitutes then the spatial repository and palimpsest of cultural memory. It's not really a mutable form, but now it is a rather adaptive, negotiated terrain. So we'll journey through these rotations and where it becomes a productive site to theorize how architecture lives, dies, and then lives again. So here, adaptive reuse is not a neutral act, but it navigates these ever-changing grounds of contemporary cultural territoriality. Where it stands today, it establishes a very barreling presence within the heart of Paris. Standing in the Les Halles district, with its annular plan and curtilage, it anchors a burgeoning cultural precincts between the Musée de l'Oeuvre and the Centre Pompidou. See that very strong axis in the middle there? And this transformation exemplifies critically this departure and transcendence of these binaries that once defined space and linear time in architectural discourse. And throughout time, prominent figures in Paris's post-World War, spaces were conceived as neutral containers, and tabula rasa mentality was the dominant way of thinking. Function obviously dictated form, and the built environment was often conceived with a privilege of newness over historical continuity. So in contrast, when we're talking about the Bourse, we're stepping through this layered narrative and the built fabric, and how its transformation frames a way then of viewing architecture that moves past this, and instead embracing multiplicity and the layering of past and present that's realized without erasure. So here, the Bourse at the bottom of the page there, it commands the axis that once stitched together Paris's mercantile and cultural cores, and sits like a hinge in between eras. The Enlightenment's rational geometry colliding with the post-industrial city, and now what was the belly of Paris is now a curated precinct of culture. The significance here lies in the assemblage of these anachronistic building fragments developing over time, and it marks the historical functions and relics in its circular form. So there's been 4 centuries of adaptation, first of all being the original conception on the site of the Hotel Sissons, which is also by the site of Caterina de' Medici. This was in 1574. Then transformed by Le Camus de Mézières into the Enlightenment Grain Corn Exchange in 1748. Here you can see an engraving of the space. Then 40 years later, it marked a transformation then again of Francois-Joseph Bélanger's timber and iron dome ribs that then replaced, obviously, the rooftop. And it became one of the largest domes of the 18th century. Then a century later, inaugurated during the Universal Exposition in 1889, the rotunda was transformed again into the Commercial Exchange, which gives it the first half of its current name, the Bourse of Commerce. The entire programmatic reorientation was towards now commerce, and now the facades were wrapped in arcades, pilasters, and sculptural ornament that really made it a monumental civic symbol of Parisian trade. And now today, in 2021, NEM architect Centedal Ander's Contemporary Museum was established. And we can see here each reinvention marks a shift from grain to capital to culture. And in these images, you can see the continuity of rupture, which is this constant act of rebuilding, yet retaining a form of remembering, in that the Bourse has lived many lives. Of the elements that do remain, there's an interesting Medici column here you can see grafted on the facade, and it remains the single witness of all these transformations, half embedded, half standing free, about 31 meters high. It disrupts the otherwise strict rhythmic composition of the facade. It's an embedding of a Renaissance relic into an Enlightenment era architecture. And here's the first instance of temporal layering that creates an architectural palimpsest of different epochs that speak to each other through time. Then Ander's intervention, this was undertaken from 2017 to 21, along with heritage specialist Pierre-Antoine Gattier, where the careful conservation of the facade, the frescoes, and the dome structures were pioneered, and really speaking to the residues of past economies. The challenge of this brief generated considerations of the ways in which the building could be restored without betraying it, and to transform it without destroying everything. Ander does this through a singular gesture and projects a whole new identity for the space. He speaks of, "I drew a circle in the circle." This move then establishing intentional spatial contrast, but also maintains a formal nod to the continuity of the circularity, which is the building's fundamental organizing principle. So this insertion of a new reinforced concrete cylinder that we can see here, 25 meters in diameter and 50 centimeters thick within the rotunda, it doesn't overwrite the building's past, but instead encapsulates it. The gesture similarly stages this disruption spatially and ideologically, and refuses the linear logic of historical progression. The conversion of the building was twofold: the restoration of the site back to its original condition of 1889, and an adaptation to its modern contemporary art program. Various elements were restored back to their original conditions and reinstated in this project, such as the maraflaged mural canvas painting at the top of the dome there, the 16th century Medici column, and the zinc and slate roofing and carpentry. Each fragment exists now not in isolation, but in dynamic temporal overlap. The gesture is monumental, but it is also mute, and it is very evocative of Andrew's minimalist language. The insertion very much reads as a spatial interruption, and one that draws attention to the geometry of the rotunda and redefines the circulatory logic. The nesting of offset surfaces creates this dizzying spiral and an arresting moment of an unfolding telescopic form. The new concrete cylinder that is sleeved within the stone facades gives shape to the central exhibition space under the cupola and encases the creation of a new auditorium in the basement below. We see here a series of new columns created through the slots in the existing 19th century metal floor, which consisted of a metal girder with cast iron columns. This way, they were able to preserve the original structure of the Bourse in a mixture of retention and replication. The series of interventions within the Bourse operates as a form of spatial remembrance, and this evokes Pierre Nova's conceptualization of lieu de mémoire, which he speaks of sites born of loss and maintained by deliberate acts of commemorative vigilance. So now as we step into the rotunda as a visitor, history is not encountered as linear narrative, but in embodied sensation. Memory is staged through atmosphere, through the shadowed arcs and echoing light that signals encounters with its preserved relics. So what we're mourning here is the fading milieu de mémoire that finds a kind of afterlife in the pauses palimpsest. Memory is no longer lived, but layered, natural, and curated, becomes a material archive. Ando's cylinder here was seeing an art installation within the central space. It acts as a threshold where past and present coalesce, and memory becomes tactile. The cylinder nests within the Bondel's historic rotunda, and this act of straitjacketing provides permanence and coherence, almost disciplining once the porous and playful fabric of the dome in its openness in its interiors. Yet concrete here as a material presents a juxtaposition with the material expression of century-old stone, iron, and paint. This gesture at the same time risks staging the building as an image of history that's staticized into scenographic backdrops. As Nova suggests, lieu de mémoire emerges when living memory fades, and when history is reconstituted as symbolic representation. This building over time demonstrates precisely this transformation through a conservationist approach, in which fragments read as sedimented images of continuity in historical memory. By forefronting these relics, we're able to keep them experientially legible. And so the visitor's movement and experience of rounds intertwines subject and environment. To inhabit this space is not merely to see fragments, but to physically and sensorially absorb their temporal resonance. The dome's cast iron ribs, once symbols of industrial futurism, now read as monument to technological evolution, resting as historical artifact. And through these tangible relics, the memories here of the fading milieu are materially and spatially layered, fragment upon fragment. To touch the exterior wall, to glance upward through the oculus, is to encounter architecture as time trace, as the physical sedimentation of use, erasure, and restoration. As you move through the building, you're guided through a rhythmic sequence of light, enclosure, and revelation, each glimpse refracting memory through selective exposure, creating spatial montages rather than linear progressions. The frescoed dome above here on the left, you can see glimpses of the historic facade through openings that serve not merely as a visual cue, but as a palpable reminder of the building's past. And here, phenomenological memory emerges vividly through the kinesthetic experience of the space. The body experiences memory as texture, detailing, and light, shifting from shadow into brightness. And the threshold now created between the round concrete insertion and the restored envelope becomes a membrane where memory emanates and where history is embodied. The cylinder is silent and poised, and introduces a spiral path with a rhythmic ascent and descent, where movement itself is a mechanism for spatial narrative. It reminds us of Gaston Bachelard's poetic reverie, where he writes of spirals as a form of introspection. The journey traces a line through the winding through, as each step is both forward movement and inward reverie. And so this phenomenological journey becomes a topoanalytic one, space unfolding within us as much as we unfold within it. The spiral aligns body with architecture, memory with movement, and all these historical layers are almost collapsed in a single moment of experience here. Unlike conventional archives, which tend towards a preservationist logic, by freezing the past within stable repositories, the success of the Bourse transformation here lies in its continual reactivation, and reactivation through curated art installations, and the programmatic shift to house contemporary art. And this both activates and subverts the building's historical narratives through sort of ongoing spatial and narrative reinscription. The building fabric now, it provides a neutral, flexible stage and canvas for this artistic intervention. On the image on the left here, we see Earthfish's mirrored floor installation that really enhances the fresco and dome and forefronts the reflections of history on all surfaces in its reflectivity. Architecture here is an equal collaborator in all the housed exhibits, and Tadao Ando's concrete insertion affords this logic, actively engages visitors in dialogues with the previous architectural epochs. And so this adaptive choreography, it really brings into relief the value shifts that underpin each act of territorial reuse that we talked about previously for over the 400 years of time, between preservation and intervention, inclusion and exclusion. We see a really interesting form of adaptive reuse here, where it serves as a site of political, cultural, and economic pressures and the shifting occupations of space over time. And it is in here, in these tensions, that lieu de mémoire emerge, moments of history that are torn from the flow of time and then deliberately returned. Nova reminds us we must deliberately create archives, maintain anniversaries, organize celebrations, because such activities no longer occur naturally. We buttress our identities upon such bastions, but if they were not threatened, there would be no need to build them. So this act of commemorative vigilance fuels the design of these spatial repositories, and therefore situates this Bourse project within a broader critical inquiry to contend on the multiplicities of how cultural architecture is positioned as a living archive. And defined by layering, negotiation, and memory, a spatial and temporal palimpsest is conceived, where form, function, and curatorial adaptation in this case converge. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karin. I would just like to say if anybody has comments or questions, please note them and we will have time for them in the end of this session. But for now, we have a slight change in schedule, so we go on to the paper called The Stonemasons Cooperative, an Accidental Monument, which is focusing on a case in Porto, in Portugal. It is written by Kadu, Tomita, and Inês Moreira, and will today be presented by Kadu, Tomita, who is an architect and researcher whose work examines how architecture, infrastructure, and territorial transformation intersect with ideological and geopolitical frameworks. He is a PhD candidate in architecture at the University of Porto, supported by FCT in collaboration with Casa de Arquitectura. His doctoral research investigates the Brazilian pavilions at the 1939 New York World's Fair and the Expo 70 in Osaka, analyzing architecture's role in cultural diplomacy. He holds a master's degree from ESAP, where he conducted FCT-supported research at CEAA, and a degree from Escola de Cidade, São Paulo, where he later taught as an assistant professor. So please, Kadu, share your presentation.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So, as Morten was saying, this project was a master's grant with ESAP. We're in partnership with the Casa da Imagem in Gaia, where we started to do the digitization of Teófilo Rego's archive, who was a photographer hired by the cooperative of stonemasons to show the progress of the company. Here are the photos of the workshops where the stonemasons transformed raw stone. It was located in by the time, peri-urban area, right at the edge of the city. But as the city expanded and eventually surrounded and engulfed the compound, the site began to adapt to change its function, starting with the installation of a school of trades. That initiative, however, remained mostly dormant for several years until it was catalyzed by the emergence of the exhibition Technical Unconscious, organized by the Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Porto in 2014 and by Inês Moreira and Gonçalo Leite Velho. From the moment on, programs such as photography and film studios, a co-working space, and an art gallery began to occupy the former industrial dependencies, signaling a clear shift from manual production to cultural reuse. Inside of the gallery, we can glimpse what I would like to call the unconscious technicality of this building, the enduring embodied intelligence of the stone itself. The same stone holds an ideological ambiguous history, illustrated by the bust of Lenin, which was found hidden within a sealed wall. So let's trace the beginning of this architecture piece. The cooperative's foundation is almost mythical. It begins from the climb up from Travessa das Almas, which is marked here in this red and white dots, in 1914, which was the first site, to the acquisition of Monte dos Congregados here in 1927, when the cooperatives focused on extracting stone from the terrain itself, removing material, reshaping the ground, and preparing the site through labor that was both practical and preparatory. This is corroborated by the LiDAR survey carried out in 2014, showing the excavated mound facing Rua Anselmo Branco. But it's also corroborated, especially through the documentary sequence of the sites, where we see how an abstract representation of rock, the first one on the left, gradually becomes the street opening and the installation of the cooperative's first buildings. It's also corroborated by this photograph from 1939, where you can see this rusticated wall and the first buildings of stonemasons cooperative. So for these records, we were able to digitally reconstruct the phases. Here we call it the landing, where we can see the initial infrastructures. And 10 years later, in 1949, using the cooperative's production surplus, the workshops were expanded and a small annex was built on the newly acquired plots along Rua da Alegria, which was becoming the social frontage of the compound. We can see this clearly in this in-chamber audit and in this photograph by Teófilo Rego. But at the moment, Rego's images show that the facade facing Rua Anselmo Branco was still the cooperative's public image. a monumental lantern of progress projected towards the city. By 1959, we find the first signs of the Salazar's Estado Novo authoritarian regime's interest in the cooperative's success. Diário do Norte article from July 13th its president, José Moreira da Silva, as a prodigy boy mason that already at the age of 9 initiated into the discipline of stone, embodying moral rectitude and tireless devotion to the craft. Another article published just days later on July 22nd echoes this tone so closely that it becomes difficult to distinguish recollection from orchestration. The success of the cooperative was such that in 1962, it acquired new parcels along Rua da Alegria, pointing to a spatial and symbolic inversion. Rua da Alegria now emerging as the new frontage. Some preliminary studies from January 1962, preserved in the Fundação Instituto Marques da Silva and redrawn for this work, show elevation alternatives for the Miradouro Tower, 3 and 6 floors plus mezzanine and the ground level. The eventual choice of a taller volume, which you can see here dashed, reveals that economic return became a decisive design parameter, anticipating the tower's role as a financial infrastructure for the cooperative's welfare system, and not coincidentally, allowing it to surpass the heights of the city's water reservoir, which was the tallest point at the time, you can see here. In 1963, the first model was unveiled in a social event that combined modernist optimism with Portuguese folk symbolism. The first designs by Davi Moreira da Silva and Maria José Marques da Silva, respectively the son of the founder and the daughter of a renowned architect named José Marques da Silva, reveal a desire to use the facade as a catalog of the cooperative's materials. Though that idea was never fully realized, it set the tone for a non-orthodox aesthetic, an apologetic gesture where architecture becomes text, surface, and final, anticipating the 70s discourse in which communication, utility, and symbolism converge in built form. We can see that clearly in the monumental initials EM, Edifício Miradouro, a Las Vegas sign, a Las Vegas-like signage crowning the tower. In 1968 and 1969, construction begins, and soon the tower surpasses the heights of the Monte dos Congregados reservoir. A new civic landmark on the highest point of Porto is born. This phase of apotheosis, of crowning, captures the symbolic peak of the cooperative's trajectory. The inauguration of the tower was widely covered in the press, which echoed nearly identical narratives, so close in tone that it's hard not to read them as another PR stunt. News outlets highlighted the presence of the Secretary of State for Information and Tourism, Dr. César Moreira Batista, which was the head of Marcelo Caetano's propaganda apparatus under the state Estado Novo, among other figures of the regime. José Moreira da Silva was again exalted as the event had coincided with his 90th birthday, portrayed once more as a model of work ethic and national Portuguese virtue. Now let's take a look on the inside. A pragmatic eclecticism prevails. The shared spaces combine upholstered seating, carpets, exotic woods, stone surfaces, custom tiles, and even artificial water features, producing a dense collage of materials that maximize impact and variety. Amid the richness of elements, another element stands out for its symbolic charge, and it's the mural panel by Guilherme Camarinha in the hotel's main lounge. It narrates a mythologized version of the cooperative's trajectory, beginning with the stoneworkers on the riverbank and ascending from left to right toward a climatic image of collective organization and technical mastery. Rendered in a visual language that fuses allegory with modernist abstraction, it dramatizes the same arc embodied by the tower itself, a passage from manual labor to institutional consolidation. Outside, the facade displays the same ideological ambiguity. The modular tile pattern forms an abstract hammer, an icon suspended between pop, socialist, and even kitsch languages. Its bright yellow background makes it a striking visual focal point. The tower thus completes the formal inversion towards Rua da Alegria, becoming the architectural crown of the ensemble. But the apex is almost always the beginning of the decline. On December 18th, 1969, barely a month after the inauguration of the Miradouro Tower, José Moreira da Silva, the president, passed away. The symbolic trajectory that had guided the cooperative for decades had reached a crossroads. In the following years, Portugal's political landscape changed radically, and by 1974, the cooperative stoneworking operations moved from the urban core to Ponte do Moreira in Maia, near the highway network and the port of Leixões. In the following decades, new buildings by the cooperative began to diverge from the formal and circulatory logic of the original complex. Residential blocks, which can be seen here, along Rua Anselmo Brancamp, designed between 1968 and 1981, were economically functional but spatially detached from the core. They faced the street with self-contained programs, small offices, rental housing, and shops. Though drawn by the same atelier, these additions no longer extended the coherence of the ensemble. Here, we reach the limits of the constructed ensemble. The resulting complex is a dense, layered, and multifunctional ensemble, and it achieves what I call the condition of an accidental Rockefeller Center, a vertical structure rising from a woven base of repurposed workshops, housing, social spaces, and commerce, and pierced through by a tunnel-like covered passage. To further consolidate the inversion towards Rua da Alegria, a final attempt is visible in a 1973 sketch attributed to Davi and Maria. It proposed acquiring adjacent parcels to regularize the geometry of the block, but the scheme that envisioned open-air parking and covered by a linear volume labeled also Hotel Miradouro was never realized. It remained a sketch, a tombstone for that ambition. The consolidation of Rua da Alegria was instead achieved through a more modest gesture. A bronze bust of José Moreira da Silva installed in the newly renamed square, which was formerly known as Largo da Duquesa de Bragança, which added a public space and symbolically inscribed his name into the city's topography. So here you can see the square, close to the ensemble. So finally, this brings us to our contribution and interpretation of an adaptive reuse history. It is to understand that even though this object has been normalized within the urban landscape, it still retains the temporalities of its pragmatic adaptations and design alternatives. Temporalities that can be reconstructed through a unified reading of its archival and architectural legacy. Within that continuity, we can juxtapose four key plateaus, each in revealing how architecture absorbs and reflects the temporalities of labor, ideology, and reuse. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kadu. We will go directly on to the third paper of this session. It is called Unfinished Territories, Subaltern Temporalities in the Ruin of Hospital Ochagavía in Santiago de Chile. The paper is authored by Claudia Oliva Saavedra, who is an architect from the University of Chile and holds a master's degree in architecture and is currently a doctoral candidate in architecture and urban studies at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. She is the director of the School of Architecture at the UNIACC University and leads AHA Chile, a platform for research and collaboration in architecture between Chile and Japan. Her work lies in the intersection of architecture, memory, and subalternity, developing critical methodologies and integrate history, archives, and performance. She curated in Chile Nitan Abandonado in 2024 and Royo Eden in 2025. Her research has been published in different countries, and the floor is yours, Claudia.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I'm a bit sick, so I will do my best. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm going to start right now. Good morning. I'm very grateful to be here today to share this research named Subaltern Temporalities in the Ruin of Hospital Ochagavía. What I will present is not only the history of a building, but the layered history of a promise that was interrupted, contested, and reappropriated over more than 5 decades. The Ochagavía Hospital was designed in the late 1960s as a major public health infrastructure project in Santiago, Chile. Located in the city's southern periphery, it was conceived to serve more than 500,000 people with high complexity free healthcare. It represented an ambitious vision, a modern hospital that would materialize the values of universal care, territorial equality, and state present in working class neighborhoods. Its architecture was modernist, efficient, and monumental, meant to symbolize progress, science, and the role of the state. But this vision was never realized. After the 1973 military coup in Chile, the construction was abruptly halted, despite being over 90% complete. The building was sealed and left in suspension for nearly 4 decades. The building stood as a massive, inaccessible concrete structure in the periphery of Santiago. Officially, for the official history, it was abandoned, but socially it remains very much alive as a monument to interrupted modernity, a point of reference, and a source of collective memory. Rather than disappearing into obsolescence, the hospital became what Ekelman calls a time-out joint, a structured trade between an anticipated future that never arrived and a past that could not be reconciled. Its hypervisibility provoked discomfort, but also imagination for all the people. It was remembered not for only what it was, but for what could have been for all the neighborhood and all the hopes. This presentation offers a situated reading of the Ochagavía Hospital through the lens of subaltern temporalities. I do not focus solely on its architectural design of functional failure. Instead, we ask what happened to the bill during these decades of so-called abandonment. What forms of use, memory, and appropriation emerge in these reigns? What kind of life does a building sustain when its official narrative is suspended? To address this question, I use a methodology of critical making and ethnographic mapping. I worked directly with residents, archives, and physical sites. This includes fieldwork interviews, visual documentation, and spatial observation of several years. The goal was not to recover the hospital original program, but to trace the alternative history that emerged for its incompletion. What I found was the room had never been truly empty. Through broken fences and informal paths, neighborhoods entered in the site. They used it as a place of refuge for temporary shelter or for religious and personal rituals. People pray for healing, held vigils, mark anniversaries, others engaged in acts of protest, leaving graffiti, lighting fires, claiming presence. These gestures were layered and complex. Some mark territory, others express grief. Some challenge of the state neglects. Some others simply adapted to it. Many were ephemeral, disappearing with time, but they accumulated a kind of social sediment, a record of inhabitation that contradicts the official history of the abandonment. One of the most powerful reappropriation of the building was of Pedro Lemebel, Chilean writer, performer and chronicle of Santiago margins. In 1989, Lemebel staged the performance Sudamerica in the front of the hospital, wearing red fabric and carrying flaming hair. He activated the ring through his own dissident lobby. He didn't not restore it. He performed in its silence, its exclusion, its pain. In his chronicles, Lemebel described the hospital as a frustrated dream of Dr. Allende, Salvador Allende president, a building that embodied broken social contract. His text did not only reflect nostalgia, they offered critic memory and counter history. In this way, Lemebel turned the hospital into a stage of queer memory, political dissident, and subaltern voice. This idea became the central to my own mapping progress. Through a series of interpretative cartography, we documented how the hospital was reappropriated through everyday practices. These maps trace informal growth, spatial inscription, ritual sites, zones of fear and care. They are not blueprints, they are memory maps of each person that is described here, like Álvaro Prieto, Gabriel Bilbao, the Patricio Navarro, and so on. Some maps shows entry points and circulation paths, how people access it to the big building despite barriers. Other register areas where rituals were performed. Space marked by candles, personal objects, or trace of fire. I trace zones used for spiritual practices, areas affected by fire, corner used as informal shelters, or simply claims as a space of rest, prayer, or survival. Each of these maps captures not only spatial data, but affected geography, how people invested meaning in the ring, how they resisted erasure. The hospital, in this view, was not a void but vessel, holding layers of presence, memory, and improvisation. Together, these layers compose a palimpsest of situated knowledge, an architecture of experience that emerged not from design, but from necessity, resistance, and imagination. Between 2020 and 2024, I collected the testimonies, took photographies, and recorded the voices of neighborhoods who had lived near the hospital for decades. Many still refer to it as the hospital, even though it had never opened. Others call it the white elephant, a term full of irony, but also affection. In these stories, the hospital was not forgotten, it was reinscribed. In 2013, the site was sold to a private developer and remained Megacentro Ochagavía. It was retrofitted into a logistic and storage complex. Some aspects of the original architecture were removed or altered. Security system and glass facade replaced exposed concrete. The building was rebranded. It passed override. Through it now provides lighting and security and offers some benefits to the surrounding neighborhood. The new project redefines the site entirely. The utopian horizon of collective care is replaced by logistical efficiency. The social memory is overridden by the demands of the market. Yet, despite this transformation, memory persists. Residents still point to the structure when telling stories. They remember protests, fires, rituals, and rumors. The building may serve another function today, but still holds the weight of a history that cannot be fully erased. In fact, in 2024, a sketch model of the hospital built as part of public exhibition in the same district allowed residents to recreate memories, question, and transformation, and revisit the building's symbolic value. This participatory gesture reflects the enduring presence of the rings in the local imagination, even after its functional shift. This project does not propose that the hospital be restored, not thus romanticize ruins, rather. It invites us to rethink that what architecture is when it's left incomplete, how space continues to live, not through form or function, but through interaction, imagination, and memory. The Ochagavía Hospital is not a faith project. It's a material archive to collective memory, inequality, and interrupted futures. It reminds us that incompletion is not empty. It is a condition of possibility, a way to listen, a way to remember. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. And as far as I can see, with the help from the presenters here, we are catching up on time. So I would like to remind everyone to note your questions, and so we have time for them in the end of this session. But first, we'll go on to the last paper of this session, which is called Gray Matters: Speculating on the Future of Aging Modernism. And this focuses on cases in Delhi in India. The paper is authored by Aniruddh Sharan, who is an architect and design researcher working in the domain of adaptive reuse. His research interests lie at the intersection between tracing changing narratives, studying architecture's environmental impacts, and designing contemporary interventions. Originally from New Delhi, India, he has experiences working as an architect and a program designer across India and Belgium, and is currently based in New York, where he works with Bayer Blinder Bell architects and planners. He graduated from SPA Delhi and Yale University, where he was recently awarded the Beatrice Shin Reich Memorial Prize for his work, Control-Alt-Delete, Speculating the Future of an Aging Built Environment. Thank you, Aniruddh.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful session so far. Today, I'd like to present part of my recent research titled Grey Matters. Built as a global project in the wake of decolonization and post-war reconstruction, modernist buildings are aging today and face the unique challenge of either qualifying as heritage nor living up to the contemporary aesthetics of progress. Today, these structures stand at a unique crossroads of either conservation, alteration, or demolition, an issue which not only has a grave impact on the socio-cultural fabric of our inherited past, but also upon the forthcoming environmental and economic future. Modernism, especially in India, was part of a larger socio-political project and was chosen as a language devoid of any local associations, and thus thought to be different from the divisive problems of the past. Although it was meant to serve as a vehicle to bring about social modernity, in hindsight, modernism only grew to the extent of bringing by an aesthetic modernity. Today, many of these buildings lie in a state of neglect and obsolescence. Their aesthetic of raw finishes, intended to champion frugal innovation, has fallen out of taste. The ordinary citizens and the ambitious politicians are both caught up in the frenzy of smart city aesthetic of development. In 2017, this led to the demolition of the Pragati Maidan, or the Hall of Nations, which was well chronicled across design circles, but often written about with a tone of nostalgia. This coverage rarely translated into larger public support, and many structures since then have been facing a similar fate. One such building, which currently finds itself in the state of neglect and ambiguity regarding its future, is the Akbar Bhavan, or the Akbar Hotel in New Delhi. Constructed in 1969, it is a building which has lived many lives, but is currently lying abandoned and faces the threats of demolition. A common impulse in the face of such a dilemma has often been to turn to the past in order to establish a significance. Conservation has often relied on the crutches of history to justify the legitimacy of the subject and made heritage the central argument for the defense. But the deeper we go into applying this conventional approach towards modernist buildings in India, the more number of challenges arises. Broadly, there are two large systematic challenges that stand in the way. The first is what gets recognized as heritage, and the second is how is the worth of existing spaces evaluated. Let's begin with the argument of recognizing these buildings as heritage. In a country as old as India, the definition of history stretches along a very long timeline. And in comparison to 15th century forts, modernist architecture, a movement which saw its height from 50s and 80s, seems to be very young to be bestowed the same title. This became most apparent when the government's Heritage Conservation Committee kept primarily a global touristic audience in mind and deemed that no building less than 60 years old can be regarded as heritage. And that brings us to the next issue. Even when it is recognized as heritage, whose heritage is being protected? The value or worth of a building, when evaluated through the lens of history alone, is derived from the value of association, be it the prestige of the designer or the legacy of its occupants. In the case of Indian modernism, this becomes a tricky line of argument. Due to famous narratives of global influences, many locals view modern design as a Western import instead of a homegrown movement. and the political parties view this as an extension of an old political ideology standing in the way of future progress. All of these factors can be best exemplified through the current case of Akbar Bhavan in New Delhi. It was inaugurated as the Akbar Hotel in 1972 as part of the Asia International Trade Fair, and which coincided with the 25th anniversary of India's independence. The building was designed by a very little known architect named Shivnath Prasad, who had a deep admiration for Corbusier's principles but very rarely built buildings. This became very evident in his proposal for the Akbar Hotel, which was formerly heavily inspired by the Unit de Habitation in Marseille. He went to the extent of incorporating iconic features like the pilotis, the brise-soleil, the sculpture elements on the rooftop, and the exposed staircase with a backdrop of the blank sheer wall. This visual resemblance has made many critics project this building as a copy and a symbol of the Corbusier's global influence, alienating and creating polarizing opinions amongst the local custodians. However, if we look beyond just the facade, we hear the voices of the multiple authors and the many elements which highlight the local rootedness of the project. For example, on this project, Prasad collaborated with a visionary structural engineer named Mahendra Raj, who in many respects can be viewed as a central spine to read in the Indian modernist movement. Unlike Prasad, Raj took the bold approach of reinterpretation instead of incorporation. For example, he created a tapered beam structural system which met the columns in a creative webbed pattern, generating column-free public spaces as well as enhancing the structure to become the finish in itself. Apart from the structural theatrics, another key feature is the interior design, which was done by Dale Keller and Leila Tayebji. The decor featured a blend of Indian handicraft elements against the backdrop of clean modernist geometry. Although there is very little documentation of this work today, this juxtaposition has become an iconic feature which can still be observed in contemporary design trends. These resolutions are where the ingenuity of the building steps away from the shadows of Le Corbusier and the formal language of Western modernism. Becoming a backdrop of daily life, it creates its own meaning and associations. Apart from multiple authors, the building itself has gone on to have many different lives. For example, after serving as a hotel for 14 years, it was sold to the Ministry of External Affairs to become the bureaucratic offices for the next 25 years, and the name changed from the Akbar Hotel to Akbar Bhavan. In 2011, the ministry decided to move away, and the building was leased out as a campus for the South Asian University. In 2023, even the university moved out, throwing the future of the Akbar Bhavan into question yet again. Today, the students have moved out, the administration has turned their gaze away from the cracked and decaying concrete, and the buzz of cultural excitement that once surrounded it has turned into silence. Thus, as this example shows, viewing these buildings through the lens of history alone isn't helping the case, as modernism falls in the lacuna of being too young for heritage but too old for contemporary imaginations. Thus, it is time to reevaluate these buildings through an alternative lens and read them through different narratives. As much as the building is a product of ideas and means, an anthropocentric approach in its own way, a building is also a collection of resources, materials, and energy. Instead of being recognized by their age or characterized just based on their stylistic resemblance, what if they were to be read as artifacts of matter? Analyzing these buildings through an environmental lens can help provide an alternative reading of these spaces. For example, apart from the visible outer appearance, this methodology can help recognize the different materials that are embedded within it. Each of these materials would have generated immense emissions during the initial production and thus have embodied carbon emissions associated with it already. Applying this methodology to the Akbar Bhavan helps render a different reading of the space. For example, despite its brutalist appearance, 35% of the building is actually made up of materials other than concrete, such as bricks, single pane glass, metal windows, and wood paneling. Interestingly, it's these 35% of materials that account for nearly 60% of the total embodied carbon of the building. The very act of demolishing these current buildings is not only going to result in letting go of these emissions, but it is also likely to result in the generation of immense amount of material waste. Given the non-biodegradable nature of the materials used in modernist buildings, they are likely to become heaps of debris occupying landfills at a time when both land and materials are becoming scarce resource in themselves. Given the scale of Akbar Bhavan building, demolishing it would not only result in the erasure of a critical part of Delhi's socio-cultural history, but it will create a need to build again, which will involve in the generation of more emissions. On top of it, it is also likely to generate nearly 18,000 cubic meters of debris waste, and due to its material makeup, release an additional 750,000 CO2 equivalent of carbon emissions, further adding to the climate catastrophe. Comparing the scenarios of demolishing and building afresh versus making a selective changes to support adaptive reuse reveals a nearly 73% reduction in carbon emissions. These analyses can help render new value and appreciation of working with the existing instead of against it. Given the current state of the climate crisis and the built environment's massive footprint in aggravating it, the urgency to reduce carbon emissions through minimizing new construction can become a driving force justifying the retention and repair of existing buildings. In a time when audiences taking these critical decisions have differentiating priorities, instead of relying on subjective criteria like taste, this methodology of adopting an environmental perspective allows one to form an alternative, universal metric which can both justify the need for preservation and scientifically measure the impact of doing so. For architectural concerns to matter in the larger scheme of things in the coming future, architecture needs to be recognized as matter itself. Given the multiplicity of modernist aesthetics, this methodology can be scaled up beyond the scope of a particular building, based on typology or materiality, influencing an alternative approach towards the conservation policy. An argument for preservation, but beyond history. The First Amendment would be to determine the classification of these buildings not on the basis of age, but through an intertemporal life cycle assessment. This environmental impact assessment needs to be conducted both for the current scenario as well as the future alternative. If the total emissions surpass a certain threshold, the buildings, regardless of their age or appearance, needs to be preserved from demolition. Additionally, a system of demolition permits could be established. Similar to the building permits, this process would create a need to justify the social and environmental impact of demolition, and at the very least, develop a need to create a management plan for the resulting debris. Besides the constraints of conservation policy, the other major hurdle which modernists and other unlisted buildings face are the economic realities of evaluating their worth and the cost of intervention. Often, the environmental cost of demolishing and building afresh are viewed as free externalities, making the cost-benefit analysis in favor of building afresh as it is seen as a cheaper alternative. One alternative system can be assessing all buildings, both old and new, on the basis of their carbon emissions. Made up of both embodied and operational emissions, this can be the new basis of measuring the worth of buildings and calculating things such as property tax. By understanding that reusing existing structures can help avoid embodied carbon in the first place, we can repurpose existing structures, and it can also lead to having reduced taxes, creating an economic incentive for reuse. Additional regulations, such as applying higher charges on discarding materials for debris or levying higher rates on virgin materials, can strengthen the economic argument for reuse. Today, most of our surrounding context in the built environment is starting to age, and with the pressures of limited natural resources and the climate crisis, disposing them away to neglect and erasure is no longer a viable solution that we can environmentally afford to bear. How to deal with the legacy of such a building invites a broadening of conversation around conservation and reinforces the need to adopt a multifocal lens which considers the environmental impact as much as the social cultural significance. What was once built as the new to erase the problems of the old has today become old itself. And it raises the same question that it had aimed to be the answer of. How do you deal with the aging built environment? The answer going forth, however, needs to be different. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniruddh. Now I would actually like to congratulate all 4 speakers today. It has been really a big pleasure to read through your excellent papers and also to hear the presentations tonight. They have given rise to many considerations concerning how architecture is to meet the future. I'd say that when reading through contemporary architectural theory, it's reasonable to ask how architectural practice is to respond to this. And this question can be addressed by referring to progressive architectural projects that confront issues like climate or class. Yet it may also be understood as an opportunity for disciplinary shifts that transform not only architectural futures, but also our conception of architectural pasts. This outlines a triangle between theoretical development, architectural practice, and the writing of architectural history. And the 4 papers in today's session all focus on cases with long histories and attend to the duration of their long lives. Together, they suggest a fundamental instability or temporality in both material presence and the cultural meaning of architecture. In light of Lacaton's keynote, one wonders whether theory or practice or history are in front, since several of the projects she presented were realized before the publication of much contemporary theory with relevance to architecture. So perhaps these projects have in fact inspired the development of theoretical frameworks that are now retrospectively supported by history. And with this, I would like to open the discussion for today's session, A Building's Life. I should say that Claudia unfortunately had to leave the meeting, so I guess we can use her paper for a general discussion, but specific questions to Claudia should be directed to her by email, and she's happy to reply them she wrote. So I would like to ask if anybody have questions or comments. Is this a hand, Elias?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you.
Oh, you muted again, Elias. You have to start over.
Can you hear me now? You can hear me. Thank you. I was saying that from the opening keynote lecture, the wonderful one that Lacaton gave us, to the last one by Aniruddh Sharan, who focused in the Indian scene, I would like to relate 2 matters to culture. How does one evaluate or treat the impact of different cultural settings, the impact they may have not only the design of buildings, but also in public communal areas? The incentives that are given in each case are different. So it would be interesting if we can juxtapose different approaches or ideas, how that problem is dealt with. Just to give a quick example, very different from India, of Athens. Athens is mainly a very solid city full of apartment blocks, typical apartment blocks. Because of tourism, that is the incentive, in the last few years,
we have a great number of buildings that are being renovated, apartment blocks of the 30s, mainly of the 60s and 70s, in similar manners. But there is nothing done in public space, in communal spaces. So again, the question is, how do different cultural settings influence these two areas of design, communal spaces and buildings, private and public? Thank you. Anne could answer, or Sharan, or anybody else. Thank you.
Well, I can take a stab at it. I'm sure Anne would do a better job of it. But I completely recognize the dilemma of different drivers influencing the change. There's interestingly, reuse is picking up, but I think it's getting adopted for different reasons. Some are economic incentives, some are aesthetically driven. And that is precisely where I was trying to argue that environmental concerns or climate change is something which is sort of universal and that can go beyond the silos of a camp which likes a particular aesthetic or not. It's very difficult to get everybody on board to align what is the correct architecture or what should be, what should be preserved and not preserved on the basis of aesthetics. But because climate concerns are something that pinches everybody equally, I feel like that becomes a universal metric, which can become almost a different language. The same way how economics is treated across, like what Anne was mentioning in the morning, regardless of the success, the architectural success of the projects, it boils down to the economics of it, and somehow that becomes a method or like a medium of language that goes across channels. I believe the future environmental catastrophe is going to become as important that one can no longer afford to say something like the public life structure, like public bus stops, shopping mall to private residences. If they are all evaluated through the lens of this is environmentally important, it can create a defense for them rather than waiting for a day that somebody feels the need that public life is as important as, say, the private offices.
Thank you. Just one word that as these matters are not only for architects, but they're publicly debated issues, and they become social issues even. Anne did mention that her approach was on the ethical, the aesthetic, and the material level. So how you can create a larger consensus, as you said, maybe based on this issue is a matter. Thank you.
Please, if anybody have questions, go to the React heart in the bottom of your screen and raise your hand.
Can't find it now, but I want to raise my hand.
Please, Fernando.
I'm sorry. Yes, for Sharan, maybe. I am pretty interested in this idea he presented of preservation beyond heritage, which can be interpreted in two ways. In one way, it could be interpreted as, okay, we already learned that we should preserve heritage. Now we are learning that we should preserve buildings that are not particularly praised in terms of heritage because of climate change and gray energy. But there is another interpretation, another possible interpretation, which could be that heritage buildings should be radically modified because we want to preserve them. And this is particularly evident for me in your example because the concrete brise-soleils are very bad environmental way of keeping the sun out, because you get all the heat in. So in terms of this case study, for instance, the appearance of the building should be completely different, perhaps. What's your view?
I 100% agree that instead of taking the notion that we have often taken in preservation, that we are restoring the past, it also results in freezing in a particular moment of time. And they're twofold. I think I support the argument that a change is required. One is that not all of these buildings are perfect. Like you're saying, there is inherent problems within it, and it deserves to be upgraded if we want to actually restore and preserve it for the upcoming future. If that is the main intent behind preservation, it needs an upgradation, and that requires flexible changes, both in terms of systems, both in terms of the way the program is done, but also how it looks. Because, like you were mentioning, apart from the thermal performance of these materials, there is like Kadu's and Claudia's presentations also showed, people have their own associations with the building, and therefore almost have a desire for it to change aesthetically. So something like concrete can, in one context, be something of a romantic past, which is a very good idea, and sometimes can be a reminder of a scar. So sometimes you want to not see that concrete anymore. So I feel like it is equally important that we do preserve, but instead of doing just that, we add on top of it and also allow for future changes. Because every time I think in architecture we try to make something future proof, it's bound to fail, because like the future knows better what they need instead of us predicting today what would be the need in 50 years. So as long as there's flexibility of addition, changes, and modification, the past can help reach there. But I think there's both room for not demolishing what we have, but building on top of what we have at the same time.
Thank you. And Jaime raised your hand.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. Thank you all for the amazing presentations. I want to ask Karin and maybe Kadu also. In Anne's presentation, she talks of this idea of multiplied temporalities and how they can be mapped out in a building, let's say, throughout the building's life. So I want to ask, I think Karin said that we cannot actively produce archives, or how can I put it, like this multiple layers, they can happen with or without us. That's my interpretation. Like there are many ways they're constituted, including, for example, the material history of the building, as Aniruddh put it so nicely. So my question is, if we cannot produce archives, can we consider that these interpretations or this historical surveys that you just presented, that you all presented, can it be considered one more layer of memory? So my main question is basically, can ideas, words, history, criticism add on to the building or not? Like how are they also part of this archival memory of the building's life?
Kadu or Karin, does anybody of you want to reply?
Yeah. In which way do you mean add-on? Because for me, when we were doing this project, I think there are a lot of oral histories that cannot be accounted in archives, and we had to stitch those pieces together with the photos we had and the drawings we had in order to try to trace the different plateaus of the building, as people were saying. So in a way, it's part of the history of it. It's living history because people know of it. So I wouldn't say it's adding on, but it's actually like an archaeological way of trying to trace something that's a phantom of the existence of it, but that might not be clear to someone who's not in touch of it, or someone who's not an architect and can perceive those things just from hearing it. After we draw it, it can be seen by anyone, I would say.
I think the idea of the phantom is really interesting. I mean, in the case of the overlap between material connotations, it's, I mean, fascinating because in the Bourse, it's an example of concrete being the new. And in Aniruddh, your example, concrete is permanence. And in many modernist building examples, concrete is associated with something that is timeless. And so even in thinking through these examples, it's almost a flip of regenerating people's ideas and associations with materials themselves. And when adaptive reuse is done really well, in many examples where the new seamlessly integrates with the old, you almost want to read the building together. You almost want to read the cohesive layering and the temporal layering as a new identity that builds upon the previous, that creates almost a revival of the space itself. And through preserving particular aspects that we deem valuable, whether it's heritage or whether it's assessed in some other way, I think we can graft essentially the new, transforming the old and presenting a next era of combined identity. And in the Bourse, it's interesting to try and trace the archival fragments. Obviously, that column we talked about on the front was one of them, but stepping through and actually trying to locate what the historical components are is almost needs to be done in conjunction with how the building is then represented and told in terms of the story. So it's not always easy to find, but it does create this really interesting almost trying to locate it, we're trying to find where the historical components are. So it's almost seamless, but yeah, fascinating.
If no one else have a question, I do have one also for you, Karin. It's unfortunately only based on your great many images now, as I haven't visited the building myself. But when I'm curious to when you refer to the layering of the building in your paper, it's by referring to different parts of the building that has their origin in different times. And I was curious to the fact that a building also gets layers by becoming old as a process. That means it weathers and it is hit by stuff and changes its how it looks. Maybe you have to get something through a window or through a door that also adds to a layering of the building as a material object in itself or by itself. So when I look at these images, it appears like the layering is the restoration of the historical fabric is so extensive that it's only it all appears rather new. It's primarily the stylistic features of the building that where you see that it has age. So I was curious, is that do you how do you experience this in the bus? Do one see or experience a layering also in the as a process of getting old?
And that plays into the idea of the palimpsest, of the layering and the visible layering. In some instances of the concrete, we are designing, and I'm sure Andrew had thought about this in that he designed it as a robust material that can withstand change. But at the same time, the mural that's underneath the dome, you would very obviously, even though in nuanced ways of paint restoration, draw your eye to the attention that it is not a new element. And where we find the interest is in the overlap of, say, for example, the iron dome, and even though it appears new in the new restoration of the glass and the new paint, the forms still speak of a historical component, and the forms of the dome in particular, the ribbing, is not necessarily something that would be presenting itself as new in this context. And so it would be great to, talk to Gautier, which is the heritage specialist. I'm sure that in thinking through the restoration of the paint and the timber and the carpentry, that there would be accentuations to the features that are historical, but at the same time, there would be a wholesale reinvention of maybe a gutting out of the spaces like the basement, for example, that drives these decisions to whether it's a restoration or whether it's a removal. And these nuances then provide interesting ways of diagrammatically then presenting a very new image versus a very old image versus the intersection between the two.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions? Or comments for the presented papers?
I'd like to ask Sharan, actually. So I was curious, how is the reception of modern aesthetics in India? Because like Brazil, where I'm from, it's a developing country. But in our case, we don't have so many landmarks that can trace the indigenous population that live there. Whereas in India, we have a lot of landmarks that were built before the modern movement. So how do you see it perceived? And has it changed nowadays with the current cultural setting in India?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Actually, I did, as part of the research, part of the study was comparing it with Brazil, actually, because interestingly, they were both built at the same time. For example, the time of Brasilia and Chandigarh is exactly the same stage, and they were perceived as both being developing nations and starting from scratch, which, like you said, was like a false presumption to begin with, that it's a new language which has no past. Uh, so the reception has widely transformed. I would mention, so let's just take the social or political symbolicism of it. When it was built as part for a young nation, modernism was seen as this golden ticket out of all the divisive problems which were inherited from the past. So instead of arguing which architecture amongst the many indigenous architectures that were there should be the one national architecture, it was viewed that modernism would be a blank slate and this would be a unifying factor. What has happened over the years, interestingly, a couple of different trajectories have happened. Economically, India has been transforming into a regional sort of economic powerhouse of its own. So there's a lot of aspiration of being contemporary and development and being new. So even though modernism is barely 50 years old, it is seen as very old in some ideologies because it does not represent, it's a very young nation with a lot of creative energy, and it does not relate to the same vision that modernism was built with in the 40s and 50s. So one part of the nation which is very young wants more aspirational steel concrete glass aesthetic, like the smart tech driven aesthetics of these buildings. Cut to, interestingly, the opposite is happening, like globally, there's a far right movement which is rising up, similar to Brazil, similar to India. There's this fascination that to return to the past that is the quote unquote original. So where the young nation feels that modernism is too old, for the right wing, politically, it reminds that this is an intervention which is too recent and we need to go to the deep past because that is our real identity. So it's almost seen as a political vendetta to erase these structures which are just 50 years old, and let's go back to an aesthetic which is more long lasting and is in a way truer to our original identity. So the perception of modernism is changing drastically. And in the middle of all this, like Fernando mentioned in the comment, it's the user experience of daily people. For them, architecture is, yes, there's concrete, there's the debates of what it should look like. But for the user, if a staircase is cracked, it is a negative impression that goes behind it. So I think the perceptions are drastically changing based on both the today's performance of these buildings, as well as this long association that it has with time, both for a younger audience and for an older audience.
Thank you.
So thank you to everybody. I think we have also now reached the limits of our time frame here tonight, I'll say, from Copenhagen. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the four presenters, and thank you for everybody following here. And then I will give the word to Jaime for a closing statement.
That's perfect. Thank you so much again for the panelists, for Anne, for Wilfried, Morten, for chairing the session. I want to invite you all for the next 3 days of conference. Tomorrow's keynote lecture will be given by Professor Abdul Malik Simon. And then in the next weekend, the 25th and 26th, we will have keynote lectures from Rosana Montiel and Marina Tabassum, followed by amazing presentations, as we've seen today. So thank you so much, and see you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.